So, kind of gotta get it straightened out in my mind as to which events go with which book. Okay, so chapter 10. Um, we had chapter 10 was the shorter of the two chapters. One encounter in chapter 10 with between a female ghost and one of the bright people, a bright woman. This female ghost in chapter 10. What is her sin? Why is she a ghost instead of a person? Go ahead, Kess.
Where to start? I can see what's going on because I struggle with some of this myself, but I'd say she started out as someone with we might say low self-esteem or insecurities. You can see that she says at the beginning, I married him even though I was a lady, and I guess he was just a commoner. So I think she picked someone of lower status because she had insecurities, and there's that saying, self-esteem is like water, it finds its own level. And in order to feel better about herself, she's gonna make him pull her cart basically everywhere she goes. So she can't just be happy with her own life and let him be happy with like his hobbies. She's got to control him. But
Global Co has joined your channel.
Yeah, that's a good summary. What is? We'll pull out some of the stuff that she says and dig into it a little bit more. But before we do that, what does the bright person tell her? Yes, that's pretty much it. The bright person doesn't get out a full sentence in the entire chapter. The rest of it is kind of the ghost talking at her. Go ahead, Wash.
I see this as kind of an example of a kind of abuse, and what's as common in abusers, they blame their victim rather than themselves. So she has to forgive him, even though it's pretty clear, as obvious as to what she actually did to him over their life.
Yeah. So she starts out with, but if you have forgiven him, is what the person says. I forgive him as a Christian, said the ghost, but there are some things one can never forget. And then the spirit, the person says, I don't understand. And which is an interesting comment because these people, the spirits, have an intimate knowledge of what's going on with these ghosts' lives, right? They have almost it's almost like God has given them Lewis where God's given them a knowledge of the whole story so that they can work towards talking these people out of whatever sin they're in. And this person seems at a at a loss as to what's going on with this ghost, because it's like, well, wait, what do you have to forgive? So it's not a lack of information, it's a lack of connecting as to what the problem is here for her. And then as the ghost goes on for the next 5 pages, we come to the spirit's point of view, like, wait, what? Whoa. This is kind of baffled, like, oh my goodness, this is not a good situation thing. This is and you can see it. There are parts that will pull them out where the ghost self-justifies quite a bit and starts to see how controlling and what a problem she's been to her husband, but then kind of talks herself into like she's all right. So let's get into that a little bit. Yeah, The whole chapter is a nightmare. It's one of those chapters that gives you a headache after you get done reading it. Like, whoa. All right, so after the spirit says she doesn't understand, exactly said the ghost with a little laugh. You never did. You always thought Robert could do no wrong. I know. Please don't interrupt for one moment. You haven't the faintest conception of what I went through with your dear Robert. The ingratitude. It was I who made him a man, sacrificed my whole life to him. And what was my reward? Absolute utter selfishness. No, but
Goatman
listen, he
joined
was
your
powering
channel.
along for about 600 a year when I married him, and then she goes on into how she pressured him to work more hours and pressured him into getting a better job so that she could go and they could get a better house. So he talks about how he couldn't work. He said, if you please, he couldn't work more than a 13-hour day, as if I weren't working much far longer. For my day's work wasn't over when his was. I had to keep him going all evening, if you understand what I meant. If he had his way, he'd have just sat in an armchair and sulked when dinner was over. It was I who had to draw him out of himself and brighten him up and make conversation. With no help from him, of course. Sometimes he didn't even listen. As I said to him, I should have thought good manners if nothing else. He seemed to have forgotten that I was a lady, even if I had married him. All the time I was working my fingers to the bone for him without the slightest appreciation. I used to spend simply hours arranging flowers to make that poky little house nice. Instead of thanking me, what do you think he said? He said he wished I wouldn't fill up the writing desk that he wanted to use with, and there was a perfectly frightful fuss one evening when Cassette spilled one of the vases over some of the papers of his. It was all nonsense, really, because they weren't really anything to do with his work. He had some silly ideas of writing a book in those days, as if he could. I cured him of that in the end. So, about how she's kind of pushing him. She's saying to be better and to work harder and stuff. But what's she really doing here? Go ahead, Wash.
Well, my question is, what was the utter selfishness that he supposedly did? Was it dying and having the sweet freedom from her? I didn't read anywhere where it says what his actual selfishness was.
It doesn't say anywhere. It's left implied, so what do you think it could be?
Like I said, the sweet embrace of death.
Yeah, that is the implication, because it goes on to talk about how she makes him basically get rid of his old friends by judging them and making them feel uncomfortable. And then she kind of creates the social circle of people that she seems useful. It's verse. Oh, thank God this isn't scripture.
The scribe might disagree.
Page 93 in my book. I was doing it all for his sake. Every useful friend he ever made was due to me. So talks about how she had gotten the other people out, gotten useful friends for him, not people who he enjoyed being around, people who could advance his career, so he could buy more stuff. Farther down there, he says, he was the most miserable host. Whenever we gave a party, everything rested on my shoulders. Robert was simply a wet blanket. As I said to him, and if I said it once, I said it 100 times, he hadn't always been that way. There was a time when he took interest in all sorts of things and was quite ready to make friends. What on earth is coming over you, I used to say. So what... And there's this idea there, of course, that she might be right in that. Well, what might she be seeing in him that is not always been this way? Go ahead, Wash and Kess. Wash first, then Kess.
Well, basically, having been in this position, I can see that his spirit is completely crushed. She has taken away everything from him and left him just a just a automaton that gets through the day. And then she attacks him for not being lively and alive like when she met him, but she crushed it out of him.
Go ahead, Cass.
This is a classic conclusion to an abusive situation. It's known as being left for dead, emotionally. Basically, the abuser's refusing to acknowledge the damage they've done. And they see it and they just say, "Oh, what's the matter with you? What's come over you? You're so different." And I don't really want to be around you anymore. Of course, she was too desperate for that, but basically what she's doing.
Yeah. She doesn't recognize that the reason why he doesn't have any more joy is because her controlling influence has sapped it from him. And she continues to self-justify even in the next paragraph, where she says, "My conscience is clear. I've done my duty by him, if ever a woman has." So you see why it would be impossible to, the implication being to forgive him. And yet, I don't know. I believe I have changed my mind. I'll make them a fair offer, Hilda. I'll make them a fair offer. People who run heaven. I will not meet him if it means just meeting him and no more. But if I'm given a free hand, I'll take charge of him again. I will take up my burden once more. But I must have a free hand. With all the time one would have here, I believe I could make something of him. Somewhere quiet to ourselves. Wouldn't it be a good plan? He's not fit to be on his own. Put me in charge of him. He wants a firm handling. I know him better than you do. What's that? No. Give him to me. Do you hear? Don't consult him. Just give him to me. I'm his wife, aren't I? I was only beginning. There are lots of things I still want to do with him. No, listen, Hilda, please. I'm so miserable. I must have someone to do things to. It's simply frightful down there. No one minds me at all. I can't alter them. So what does she really enjoy about her relationship with her husband?
That is dark.
That he's a puppet. And she's the puppet master.
Go ahead, Cass.
To pick up on what Goat said, I think it's darker than that he's a puppet. I think it's that she enjoys violating someone else's will repeatedly. It gives her a feeling of power, and she's gotten addicted to that. And like all addictions, it's never enough. You always have to do more.
Yeah. She does not love her husband in the sense of loving someone as they are. Instead, what she loves about her relationship with her husband is it gives her power to alter someone's identity as she chooses. Which is in a sense even darker than hatred, right? Because at least hatred acknowledges somebody as other. But this is something even beyond that. This is a desire to just not even a respect for the person as other, but just as something for them to alter and to play with. Yeah, it's not to play with, but to have power over. Yeah, it's a pretty dark chapter, and it's unsettling, right? Because this isn't. I know that this, it's kind of the Lewis sets up as kind of that stereotypical, nagging wife thing. But this is beyond a wife, a regular, the conflict in a regular marriage. This is a controlling relationship where she's in a relationship with him solely for the sake of controlling him and making him do her will. And this is something that can happen to both men and women. And what's really frightening about this is she doesn't see it. To her, this is her doing him a service. This is not a sin for her. This is her doing her service, her duty, she says. And in fact, she's angry at him for wanting to basically not have to conform to her image of what he should be. Go ahead, Cass.
I would say, while men and women both can be controlling, this is a uniquely feminine, or I should say female. It's not feminine. It's just, this is there's laws against men hitting women in most civilized countries. You don't find on the books, "Thou shalt not nag your husband to death." You can do it and get away with it, and there's not a lot of ways to escape that, especially, I'm sure, in a more conservative society. So it's worse almost than hitting somebody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the intent is the same. No, that's a good point. It's a good perspective. So how does this end? Is she allowed to go into heaven and have a free hand, as she calls it, with her former husband? Yeah. She's not allowed. It says she's not allowed to bring hell into heaven for this guy, right? She's not allowed to do this. So it says the ghost, which had towered up like a dying candle, snapped suddenly. A sour, dry smell lingered in the air for a moment, and then there was no ghost to be seen. So, not allowed to continue to have power and have this abusive relationship with him.
So did she be cast out of existence, or did she go back to hell? It's a little unclear what happened there.
Yeah, it would appear to me that her chance has passed, and she has become the embodiment of her sin. Which happens not the next chapter, but the chapter after for somebody else as well. We see as these people come, as their chance passes, their sin becomes more and more of who they are, and hers is past. I would read this as she's sent back to hell, and what remains of her identity is pretty much just that sour. How does Lewis say it? Sour, dry smell. Yeah. All right. Anything more on her before we move on to chapter 11? I was gonna say, okay, so let's get out of that chapter. There is so there's two encounters in the next chapter, and when I was kind of remembering this book, I kept them separate in my mind, but I never really realized until I read through this time how much they intertwine and explain each other, which is really interesting. So, first encounter. What's the first encounter? What is up with this ghost for the first encounter that Lewis sees? He says it is the most painful meeting he witnessed. One of the most painful meetings he witnessed.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cass.
The question was, who were they? It was a woman and her brother, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And What's her deal? Why is she a ghost and not a spirit? Why has she not entered into heaven yet? Good, Cass.
She's elevated her maternal instinct over her love for God. Have you ever had any?
Yeah. So she had a son, which she lost. And the first thing she asks when she gets in is to see her son. And her brother meets her and says, he's here, but you are not. Well, I'll just read it. She says after they talk about how the son's here, but farther up, the mother says, "I should have thought if you can see him, my own son could." The brother says, "It doesn't always happen like that. You see, I have specialized in this sort of work." "Oh, it's work, is it?" snapped the ghost, and then after a pause, "Well, when am I going to be allowed to see him?" "Well, there's no question of being allowed, Pam. As soon as it's possible to see him, you will, of course. You'll need to be thickened up a bit, because remember, the ghosts are kind of transparent, and the people who have been here a while in heaven are solid." "How?" said the ghost. The monosyllable was hard and a little threatening. "I'm afraid the first step is a hard one," said the spirit, "but after that you'll go on like a house on fire. You'll become solid enough for Michael to perceive you when you learn to want someone else beside Michael. I don't say more than Michael, not at the beginning. That will come later. It's only the little germ of a desire for God that we need to start the process." "Oh, you mean religion and all that sort of thing. This is hardly the moment, and from you of all people." "Well, never mind. I'll do whatever's necessary." What do you want me to do? Come on. The sooner I begin, the sooner they'll let me see my boy. I'm quite ready." "But Pam, do think. Don't you see you are never beginning at all as long as you are in that state of mind? You're treating God only as a means to Michael. But the whole thickening treatment consists in learning to want God for his own sake." And she responds with the loaded phrase, "You wouldn't talk like that if you were a mother." So, the issue here is that she has come to idolize her son. And she thinks that she loves her son more than God. Or she thinks that she loves her son the most of anything else in her life. Now, whether that is a real love or not, we'll talk about in a moment. But she wants to see her son, does not want to see God. What's the problem with that? Isn't that a natural thing? Go ahead, Kess.
It's an issue of proportion. They say so later. She doesn't love almost anyone or anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. She doesn't love anything or anyone else, and that also hinders her love for her son. So the brother goes on to explain that the son was taken away, died, partially for the mother's sake, which of course does not go well in the mother's eyes. But the brother explains human beings can't make one another really happy for long. And secondly, for your sake, he wanted your merely instinctive love for your child, Tigris has shared that, to turn into something better. He wanted you to love Michael as he understands love. You cannot love a fellow creature fully till you love God. Sometimes this conversion can be done while the instinctive love is still gratified. But there was, it seems, no chance for that in your case. The instinct was uncontrolled and fierce and monomaniac. Parentheses, ask your daughter or your husband. Ask your own mother. You haven't once thought of her. Like I said, idolizing her son, loving her son more than anyone else, more than God. So, does that mean that she loved her son too much? Yeah, it is a trick question. Because that's the logical question that I asked the first time I read through this and the Four Loves. Does that mean that we can love other people too much? And it's the wrong question. Which is why I asked it. It's not about loving other people less to get over idolatry. It's about loving God more. We have to love things in the right proportion. So her love isn't that her love is bad. And the brother says that. Pam, no natural feelings are high or low, holy or unholy in themselves. They're all holy when God's hand is on the reins. They all go bad when they set themselves up on their own and make themselves into false gods. So, love for the son without her loving God the most has become a problem because it was never meant to be in control. And this is a theme of Lewis's, that secondary goods are always lost when they are put up in place of primary goods. So the primary good in this situation being, one's love for God. If you take a secondary good, one's love for somebody else, which is a good thing. We're called to love other people, so it's a good thing. But when you take the secondary good and set it up as the primary, you lose both. And the secondary gets perverted and mutated almost like a cancer into something that draws life out of everything else in someone's life and becomes a problem. Go ahead, Wash.
I think a lot of it can be also tied back to societal beliefs versus real truth, or I'm trying to remember what Lewis called it, the law of nature, in that we're told that, just as Kessa just pointed out, that the highest and holiest feeling is a mother's love and this and that. Except that if you don't balance that with how the Bible teaches you to love, then it just becomes a perverse thing like this.
Go ahead, Kess. Good point, Wash.
Two things. One is that while she did have a sort of need love for her son, that's all it was. She's actually looking to her son to meet her needs. And for a parent to do that to a child is wrong on so many levels. She's not doing what's best for her son. She's actually gotten quite selfish. And the second, pretty much what Wash said, you can see she's had social encouragement to think this way, although she's obviously taken it farther than most of society intends. This idea that the closest relationship is between a mother and her child. And there are other societies that believe that, notably Japan, and it's one of the reasons they have some of the messes they do. Like, just don't have time to get into it now, but they have problems because of it. And it's not a biblical belief. It doesn't say in the Bible that a parent's love for their child is the highest and best kind of love. And I don't know that it says anywhere that any love but God's for us is the best and highest, but Christ and the church are portrayed as Christ and his bride. It's a romance, not a parent-child relationship. It's just worth remembering.
Yeah, which is interesting because it was a very patriarchal society that Christ is.
Sean joined your channel.
That the New Testament and the Old Testament were written too, where family identity was super important. And the primary relationship expressed by Christ towards the church, not towards individuals, but towards the church, is that of romance, romantic love. So deliberately avoiding using this love for the primary illustration. So she can see this problem in one of her friends. On page 101, I keep saying verse, good grief. Page 101. If you meet people like the Guthrie woman and her dreadful Bobby, of course not. I hope you're not suggesting. If I had Michael, I'd be perfectly happy, even in that town. I wouldn't always be talking about him to everyone else. Everyone hated the sound of his name, which is what Winifred Guthrie does to her brat. I wouldn't quarrel with people for not taking enough notice of him, and then be furiously jealous if they did. I wouldn't go about whining and complaining that he wasn't nice to me, because, of course, he would be nice. Don't you dare suggest Michael could ever be like that Guthrie boy. There are some things I won't stand. The brother replies, what you see in the Guthries is what natural affections turn to in the end. If it is not
A
to be
Sean
what
disconnected
natural
from your
affection
channel.
turns to in the end, if it is not to be converted. He says what you're seeing there is what happens when that affection from the mother to the son becomes the primary thing. Gets set in place of your love for God. What you're seeing is that relationship put in the wrong place. Implication being, what you're seeing is what you're doing. And this is the dangerous part about any sort of sin, especially sins that involve pride and love, is that everyone else can see our sin, but we can't. We're blind to it, which is why we need to be humble enough to listen to those around us when they tell us we have a problem. Yeah, that's why we need to be in a community and have people hold us accountable. There's community is a word that's bandied around quite a bit in modern American society, mostly because I think we desire it and we don't really know how to do it. But we have this idea of community as being this kind of loving, goofy relationship, like The Office and Parks and Rec. But really, one of the most important elements, and that is obviously love and warmth and joy and hang out with people and playing is an important part of community. But a big part of it is holding people accountable, because I need that community to tell me where I've goofed up, because I can't see. I make excuses for myself. It's a great book on a concept called cognitive dissonance, fancy academic term for making excuses for oneself, called Mistakes Were Made, subtitle, but not by me. And it kind of goes through the history and the psychology of how more often than not we're blind to our own mistakes and find ways to explain them away. In a way that looks like we're lying to everybody else, but really all we're doing is lying to ourselves and fooling ourselves and making ourselves feel like we're right. And that's what she's doing here. And that's, again, shows the need for other people to correct her, which is what the brother's trying to do. Then he says, kind of, he brings out that she's not been fair to her husband or her wife. He says, so after he says, kind of draws the conclusion to her and the Guthries, or draws the comparison. It's a lie, a wicked, cruel lie. How could anyone love their son more than I did? Haven't I lived only for his memory all these years? Well, that was rather a mistake, Pam. In your heart of hearts, you know it was. What was a mistake? All that 10 years ritual grieving, keeping his room exactly as he'd left, keeping anniversaries, refusing to leave that house though Dick and Muriel were both wretched there. Of course, they didn't care. I know that. I soon learned to expect no real sympathy of them. You're wrong. No man ever felt his son's death more than Dick. No, not many girls loved their brothers better than Muriel. But it wasn't against Michael they revolted. It was against you. Against having their whole life dominated by the tyranny of the past, and not really even Michael's past, but yours. You're heartless. Everyone is heartless. The past was all I had. And the brother responds, it was all you chose to have. So, is he getting after her for grieving the death of her son? What's he saying to her here? Go ahead, Kess.
It is entirely possible, and we've seen it in recent weeks, in this, to grieve for someone without being cruel to other people over it.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's natural and healthy to grieve. And different people read that verse different ways. The Jesus wept verse, the shortest verse of the Bible. When Jesus' friend Lazarus died, it says as they were leading him to the tomb, Jesus wept. I think, and the majority opinion of the church has been that Jesus wept there because he died. And even though he's going to bring Lazarus back to life in a few moments, the death and that separation, though temporary, is sad. Jesus was human, fully God and fully human, but that humanity, I think, it's natural and important for us to grieve. But there's a healthy way to do it. And she has not done it that way, because her grief isn't about the son, and it isn't about the loss he is to the family. It's about her. And she lost her idol, her primary joy. And that's why the others were able to move past it, but she was not. In fact, she held them, probably their healthy grieving process, back because of how she handled this. Yeah, that's a good point, Kess. Yeah. So, sorry, go ahead, Wash.
I was just going to expound on what Keth said, in that both her and Pam, the first woman in the other chapter, neither one of them actually felt any love toward the person they supposedly loved and worshipped. Both of them are willing to drag that person out of heaven into hell just so they can have them around again. And love is about thinking about the other person and not yourself.
Yes. And that's what we see here. Is we see when the love for someone else, or what we think, that feeling of love for someone else, is taken out of its rightful place and put in the place of it being the ultimate goal, it being the idol, it being our God, it ceases to be love. Because true love that wanted what was best for the other person, would feel no bitterness that A, the person's in heaven, and B, we're going to have to wait to see them. Because if that's what's best for them, then that's the best thing. That's what the love would want. Go ahead, Cass, sorry.
What was A? I'm sorry. What was down?
Sorry, what was it again?
What was point A and B again? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Oh, that's okay. I said that if when love is taken out of its proper place, the natural love for another person, and put in the place of our love for God, it ceases to be love because it doesn't want what's best for the other person. So, if it was a true love that these people felt for the one woman for her husband, the for her son, neither one of them would be upset that the person was in heaven. That's what would be what was best for the other person. And even though that they weren't able to see them right now, they'd be okay with that because they would trust God to do what's best for the other person. Because that's why they can't see the other person right now, is because it's not what's best for both of them. They're not in a situation where they can have that relationship. Yeah, so it's a similar, but perhaps less. It's a similar situation, but in some ways, in other ways, there is some hope for this mother. It seems Lewis seems to imply, because he never sees the end of this encounter, that perhaps there's the opportunity for this woman to be saved. In fact, that's what George MacDonald says on the next page. After Lewis kind of takes him away. Well, first, the woman gives this remark to her brother: "I hate your religion, and I hate and despise your God. I believe in a God of love." Brother replies, "And yet, Pam, you have no love at this moment for your own mother or for me." So they go back and forth about a little bit about that, and then George MacDonald takes Lewis along and says, "Hey, come, we'll go a little bit further." Lewis talks about that because he's clearly rattled by that conversation. This is something that Lewis talks about a lot in his books. Another book by him, The Four Loves, he talks about it a lot. But Till We Have Faces is kind of a deeper exploration of this concept, almost as if it was taking this encounter, switching out the relationship a little bit to a sibling relationship, and exploring it for the whole book. It's dark, but it's really good. But George MacDonald, so Lewis says to George MacDonald, sorry, his teacher, "Is there any hope for her, sir?" "Aye, there's some. What she calls her love for her son has turned into a poor, prickly, astringent sort of thing. But there's still a wee spark of something that's not just her in it. That might be blown into a flame." There's a spark of something that's not just herself in it. So he leaves the door open to that part that is still good, might be burnt in, that might be blown into a flame, might be redeemed. Kind of comes down to the choices she's going to make there. So then Lewis says, well, then some natural feelings are really better than others. I mean, are there better starting points for the real thing? Better and worse. There's something in natural affections which will lead it onto eternal love more easily than natural appetites could be led on. But there's also something in it which makes it easier to stop at the natural level and mistake it for the heavenly. Brass is mistaken for gold more easily than clay is. And if it finally refuses conversion, its corruption will be worse than the corruption of what he call the lower passions. It is a stronger angel, and therefore when it falls, a fiercer devil. So then Lewis goes, well, this is going to be a tough thing to convey to people on Earth. How am I going to explain it to someone? So he says, but could one have the face to go to a bereaved mother in her misery when one's not bereaved oneself? MacDonald cuts him off. No, son, that's no office of yours. You're not a good enough man for that. When your own heart's been broken, it will be time for you to think of talking. A little unsettling, because this is written long before Lewis meets Joy Davidman, his wife, and he goes through a period of deep depression and uncertainty after losing her, where he talks about how these things that were academic for him, he's now having to live out. Yeah, it's a little unsettling, yeah. All right, so then this switches into a much more straightforward encounter. The next encounter. What happens in the next encounter he has between a ghost and well, not a person, not a spirit, not a person from heaven, but with an angel. What happens with that next encounter? Oh boy.
Sidetracking. There's
Go ahead, Cass.
there's a lot of trying to wiggle out of obvious conclusions in the next encounter.
How so? Go ahead, Wash.
I just like how the angel is not distracted by all the logical arguments and all the niceties and polity and all the societal things that this guy tries to do, and instead forces the question, "Do you want me to kill the evil lizard?"
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So this guy has on his shoulder a lizard. And he's kind of off away from the rest of the ghosts. We get this impression that he's kind of embarrassed about this lizard. But what is the lizard? Do we find out? Yeah. It's lust. It's some sort of sexual sin. Which is interesting because we haven't come across that yet. Everything else have been sins that are somewhat socially acceptable. I don't remember the last time I saw someone get official church discipline for nagging their spouse or for for grieving their son too much or for being too judgmental towards a murderer. I don't remember official church board actions about those sorts of things, but I have seen several over sexual sins. So this guy goes to go back to help because he's embarrassed about this sin. It's like, well, okay, I should. In fact, he says in page 108 for me, because after the angel says, as Wash said, shall I kill it? He says, well, I didn't say anything about killing him at first. I hardly meant to bother you with anything so drastic as that. It's the only way, said the angel, whose burning hands are now very close to the lizard. Shall I kill it? Well, that's a further question. I'm quite open to consider it, but it's a new point, isn't it? I mean, for the moment, I was only thinking about silencing it up here because, well, it's so damn embarrassing. So we do get the idea this guy is embarrassed about his sin. Now, is that a healthy way of looking at this sin? Is it different than the other ghosts? Kess says yes and no. It is it is different than the other. It's another trick question for those of you who are being silent because you probably recognize that. Yeah. If it's only a concern for other people's opinions, then embarrassment isn't enough. Exactly. But if that embarrassment leads towards change, or towards at least recognizing it for what it is, which is sin, then we have some sort of progress here. And that is the big difference we have between this guy and the other ghosts. Though the other ghosts' sins are socially acceptable, not something that would get you kicked out of a local church, except for maybe the ghost theologian with his theological society in hell. In Baptist churches, that would get you the boot. Except for maybe that guy, the other people have sins that wouldn't necessarily get them booted out of churches, but they don't recognize them as sin, and they don't feel embarrassed about them. And embarrassment isn't enough. but at least in a sense he's recognizing it as something that's not good. He starts to make excuses for it. We do get the impression that this is something he's not proud of. So, action is required. Angel gives him a choice. Does this man have to change? Come into heaven. Go ahead, Cass.
Absolutely, he's going to have to make an absolutely wrenching change.
Yeah, what does he have to do? Go ahead, Wash.
Let him kill his lizard.
Yeah. So in a sense, he doesn't have to do anything, right? Because he can't kill the lizard. But he has to let Angel kill the lizard. And what's great about it is he tries to make it like a painless process. He says, honestly, I don't think there's a slightest necessity for that, the killing it. I'm sure I shall be able to keep it in order now. I think the gradual process would be far better than killing it. Angel responds, the gradual process is of no use at all. Go ahead, Wash.
Think of all the ghosts and spirits we've encountered. This is kind of the easiest one in that he doesn't seem like he's really attached to the lizard. It seems like it's something he's struggling to get rid of. And I think that's why he's offered the easiest solution to get rid of it, which is not we have to gradually change, not we have to slowly make you better until you can become a spirit. It's, well, we kill this thing and you're good, but you have to let us kill this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it has to be an immediate choice too, right? Because he tries to put it off. He says, in fact, I'd let you kill it now, but as a matter of fact, I'm not feeling frightfully well today. It would be mostly to do it now. I need to be in good health for the operation. Some other day, perhaps. Angel says, there is no other day. All days are present now. Then he has the great line about from Cass about, I never said it wouldn't hurt you. I said it wouldn't kill you. About when he kills the lizard. But he needs the permission. This moment contains all moments. Why are you torturing me? You are jeering at me. How can I let you tear it to pieces? If you wanted to help me, why didn't you kill the damn thing without asking me before I knew? It would be all over now if you had. I cannot kill it against your will. It is impossible. Have I your permission? They go back and forth. The lizard promises to be good. Okay, Lizard kind of says, I've gone too far. It's okay. We'll just go back to the innocent lust stuff. Angel keeps pressing him. And the creature finally says, I know it will kill me. Implication being when you kill the lizard. The angel says, it won't. But supposing it did. I almost get this impression like there's this pause. Right? And the ghost says, you're right. It'd be better to be dead than to live with this creature. Well, then may I? Damn and blast you. Go on, can't you? Get it over with. Do what you like, bellowed the ghost, but ended whimpering, God help me. God help me. Also, the only time in this book that a ghost calls out to God for help in any sort of prayer. Very simple prayer, just God help me. And what happens? What happens to the lizard? X-Men Redux. The angel kills it, and it becomes a great stallion for this ghost to ride. And the ghost becomes a person, and then rides the stallion. Go ahead, Kess.
They become their true selves.
Yes. Yes, so both the person and the desire, the thing he was struggling with, become their true selves. This thing that he was struggling against becomes a good thing. My my pastor this today preached on Portia and Luke. It was about Jesus explaining how he overcomes demons, and one of the things he talks about is how there's, when somebody strong is guarding their house with their armor, the house is secure until somebody stronger comes along, defeats the guy, and takes his armor as part of the spoils. What that's talking about is in ancient battles, when someone was defeated, the first thing that you do is go through the armor, like go through their stuff and take all their weapons and armor, be like, yeah, I'm going to use all this stuff now. Woo! My armor and weapons. Kind of like what happens in PUBG when you shoot someone, honestly. Modern example works pretty good too. Yeah, see PUBG, exactly, watch. But there's that idea here. This thing that the enemy was using to destroy this guy and to bring this guy down into hell and to hold him back from heaven. When God and his angel and his people are allowed to do their work on it, it turns from being something used against, a tool used against him, to an asset that he can use to glorify God. Just like when somebody gets shot in PUBG and then you go rifle through their body, you take all their stuff. That's what's happening here. That's what the kingdom of God is doing to that lizard. Now this guy can use that stallion, which is what it was originally intended to be, to glorify God. And something that he can use in the afterlife to draw him closer to God. He rides it farther into heaven. That which was meant for bad is used for good. And it was something that the guy couldn't see beforehand. He couldn't see it in this life. And he couldn't even see it until he was allowed to let it be killed. But then once it was killed, it went from being something that he couldn't see himself without to dragging him down into something that now drags him closer to God and is part of his good identity. Yep, he had to leap off the cliff first, exactly. MacDonald goes and explains this to Lewis, kind of like we just talked about. Says nothing, not even the best and noblest, can go on it as it was. Nothing, not even the lowest and most bestial, will not be raised again if it submits to death. So everything must be submitted to Christ in order to be redeemed. But if it's submitted to Christ, everything will be redeemed. Lewis is troubled by this because it seems as if in a sense, the base struggle of the lust, the guy was better off than the mother with her struggle, seemingly noble struggle of grief for her son. He says, "But am I to tell them at home that this man's sensuality proved less of an obstacle than that poor woman's love for her son? For that was, at any rate, an excess of love." Donald says, "You'll tell them no such thing," he replied sternly. "Excess of love, did you say? There was no excess, there was defect. She loved her son too little, not too much. If she had loved him more, there'd be no difficulty. I do not know how her affair will end, but it may well be that at this moment she's demanding to have him put down with her in hell. That kind of thing sometimes perfect. That kind is sometimes perfectly ready to plunge the soul they say they love into endless misery, if only they can still in some fashion possess it. No, you must draw a different lesson, another lesson. You must ask if the risen body, even of an appetite, is as grand as a horse, as ye saw. What would the risen body of maternal love or friendship be? Which is something to think about. So if Lewis is saying, yes, the wrong kind of love is holding her back there, but if she allows that to be redeemed, how much more can that be enjoyed now after it has died and been raised up under Christ, submitted to his love? But first it has to die, like he said about the lizard. Lines up with the New Testament, right? Those who endeavor to save their lives will lose it. Those who lose their lives will save it. Not just about life, but also about love in general as well. Like I said, it's the wrong kind of love, not excess, but defect too. All right, that's chapters 10 and 11. Apologize for going over tonight. Anything else that you guys saw on that you want to pull out to talk about?
Well, I can answer the question. Maternal love or friendship would be a spaceship. Spaceship. Spaceship.
Spaceship!
I could build a.
Spaceship.
That's such a good scene.
You're not going to stop me? As an 80s Lego kid, and Bob was right here with me on this. Spaceship! I mean, it has to be proportionally better than the horse. Come on.
Yeah. Well, that's the implication for sure. Yeah.
I do like how Lewis answers the question by, is there another river?
Yeah. The next encounter is pretty unsettling. Probably the two most unsettling encounters for me are the mother one and the next one. The next one takes the cake, though.
I don't know, I think from personal experience, the wife one is the most unsettling to me.
All right, next week, 12 and 13, I will let Winged know.